Uh, Dear colleagues, thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. This presentation is deeply important to me. In times of war, the work of preserving heritage, safeguarding song traditions, and building cross-cultural connections feels more urgent than ever and profoundly important for Ukrainian ethnomusicology. Thank you once again for this opportunity. And now, with great joy, I pass the floor to my daughter, Mariana.
Hello. 120 years of studying Ukrainian ritual melodies using the methods of rhythmic, typology and mapping, scientific and political results. Historical periods of the formation of the typological geographical school. Iryna Klymenko is a representative of the structural typology school, which has a history of over a century in Ukrainian ethnomusicology. The abstracts outlines 7 periods in the development of the typological geographical school. Those which marked in red on the screen will be discussed in more detail. First part, a historical publication of music collections with the typological classification of Ukrainian folk melodies at the beginning of the 20th century. Stanislav Ludkevich, Filaret Kolesa. In 1906, an unusual collection of Ukrainian folk melodies was published in Lviv, Galician Russian folk melodies, it was named. These were melodies recorded on a phonograph in 1902, and the musical transcriptions were systemized for the first time, not according to the subjects of the songs, but according to the genre groups and their typological features. How to... Як цю панельку нижню Зараз. Супер. Excuse me. The collection was compiled by Stanislav Ludkevich, who later became a well-known Ukrainian composer. The collection opened with ritual songs, labor or harvest songs, followed by wedding songs, carols, and spring songs. Within a given genre, the compiler arranged the works according to their syllabic rhythmic formulas. These formulas were written out before groups of musical samples of the same type. The notation was divided into bars exclusively according to the caesuras in the poetic text. This method of determining types was based on the experience of previous researchers of Ukrainian folklore, Alexander Potebnya and Petro Sokalsky, 19th centuries. The student of Stanislav Ludkevich, Bogdan Lukanyuk, wrote several articles about the revolutionary method of his professor. Filaret Kolesa became a follower of this trend. He compiled a collection of haivki, spring melodies and dances of the Galicians, which was published in 1909. Filaret Kolesa gave a detailed explanation of his typological approach in a special essay for this collection. He is also the author of a major theoretical work, The Rhythm of Ukrainian Folk Songs, which appeared in the Notes of the Shevchenko Scientific Society. Kolesa referred to songs belonging to the same typological groups as song types. In his typological analysis, the scholar gave preference to syllabic verse formulas. In the tandem of verse plus musical rhythm, he considered the structure of the verse to be key. A consistent exposition of the theoretical system of rhythmic analysis was provided by the Kiev scholar Kliment Kvitka in his works of the 1920s and 1930s. Of these, Europeans were familiar with some of his works. The names of the works you can see below. Bogdan Lukanyuk's study on the history of the term ethnomusicology indicates that it was Kliment Kvitka who first used the term ethnomusicology in 1928 to name the discipline that is now known throughout the world. The term then spread to Europe. A hypothetical map was provided by Polish author Piotr Dalik. We can see it below. Clement Kvitka's important theoretical theses are as follows. He shifts his research focus from syllabics to musical rhythm, since syllabics proved to be unstable and allowed for significant fluctuations. Secondly, rhythm has certain quantitative model formulas which are characterized by specific variation algorithms. If we identify these patterns, we have a tool for identifying the original initial models and their later transformations, and thus we can determine the relative time of creation of a particular layer of songs, dividing them into earlier forms. For example, in the table on the right, they are at the top, and secondary forms, lines at the bottom. Clement Kvitka declared that ritual genres deserve special attention. After all, Ukrainian oral rural tradition is characterized by a complex hierarchical system of calendar agricultural holidays, which were conditioned by the magical beliefs of farmers. Initially, the calendar was based on solar cycles. Among them, special rituals marked the winter and summer solstices and the spring equinox, which coincided with the beginning of the new agricultural year. An important feature of the annual rituals was that the New Year holidays had long been associated with magical beliefs, which is why the corresponding songs were performed by men. In contrast, the spring and summer seasons were accompanied exclusively by women singing, as it was believed that women's voices had a magical influence on the growth of crops. From the end of the 10th century, Orthodox Christianity began to be introduced in Ukraine. However, for a long time, two religious worldviews coexisted, and a hybrid system of holidays and song genres was formed. The second huge ritual collection consists of wedding songs as well as songs for the birth of a child, which is now regarded as rarities. In the annual cycle, the season of women's singing was of particular importance, encouraging the blossoming of nature and having a magical influence on plant growth. Such songs remained relevant until the beginning of the 21st century. Here is an example of a song that was played at the beginning of the summer, and it is a revival based on a recording from the 1980s.
Ой, чиєш та жито колосом колосить, ой, рано, рано, колосом колосом колосять, хазяїна просять, ой, рано, рано, хазяїна просять.
Kvitka was the first to declare the need to create geographical maps of the distribution of rhythmic types of melodies, similar to what linguistics do. The scholar became the ideologist of the future discipline of melogeography, announcing in articles in the 1930s and 40s a program for the geographical study of Slavic ritual melodies. The scientists also expressed the idea of comparing the areas of melodies and historical areas. The boundaries of the distribution of song types within the territory of the Eastern Slavs clearly exist. Historical and geographical boundaries, determined by events of the distant past, are now evident in local complexes of cultural components which distinguish certain territories. Political repression against Clement Kvitka. In 1933, he was sent to a Stalinist camp on false political charges, halted the development of the structural direction in Ukraine. We owe the revival of Kvitka's work and the preservation of his writings and archives to Lviv scholar Volodymyr Hoshovsky. He developed Kvitka's idea using new materials and was an active field collector. He also began to publish the first overview maps, hatching of geographical areas where a certain phenomenon was widespread. Here are the samples of maps by Volodymyr Hoshovsky made in 1970s. Volodymyr Hoshovsky's student Bogdan Lukanyuk has continued and developed Klement Kvitka's ideas from the 1980s to the present day, creating a powerful school of Lviv researchers, writing several books on the theory of folk rhythms, rhythmic variations in song folklore, and musical temporal rhythm. Since the 1990s, my colleagues, students, and I at the National Ukrainian Music Academy in Kyiv have been conducting research in line with the approach formulated by Bogdan Lukanyuk. The main difference between the 19th and 2010 was the accumulation of thousands field recordings. This included notated publications made by ear without any techniques, originating in the 1860s, collections by Oskar Kolberg, Pavlo Chubinsky, and later Mykola Lysenko and others. Then more widespread notated recordings from 1900s. Some songs were recorded on phonographs, as described in a special study by Irina Dovhaluk. Individual archival manuscripts from the 1950s, 1960s, systematic field research using the frontal method from the late 1970s, most actively in the 90s and 2000s. This has been possible because Ukrainians' rural music traditions remained largely intact until the early 21st century, and in some areas we can still record songs today that sound very similar to recordings made 100 years ago. This array of sources was entered into a database in Excel format, which covered more than 65,000 ritual songs created by Ukrainians, Belarusians, Poles, and Lithuanians. The database has 110 columns containing passport and analytical data. This made it possible to create a complete analytical register of the rhythmic syllabic forms of ritual melodies of Ukrainians and Belarusians. My colleagues and I used mapping methods similar to those used in linguistics. Rhythmic patterns of songs were marked on the maps. They are written in the map legends with different signs, and sometimes patterns of their pitch organization were also marked. In total, more than 350 maps were created. First, we create documentary maps with the names of specific settlements marked on them. Based on documentary maps, we create overview maps of various levels of generalization. Here is the most generalized and detailed map of songs from the Kupala cycle, for example. Here you can see Ukraine's main river, the Dnipro, on whose banks Kyiv has stood for 1,500 years. The most elaborated maps of melodies for winter holidays here is presented. These are the series of maps for wedding melodies. Most of the maps have been published in the journal Problems of Ethnomusicology. You can observe it in the link above. The series of 132 maps was compiled into the Atlas of Ritual Melodies of Ukrainians in the Slavic Baltic Early Traditional Melody Massive. It was published together with a theoretical study in 2020. Some of the monograph's provisions are highlighted in my English language articles. The conclusions from the series of melogeographic maps covered not only the world of Ukrainian folklore, but also neighboring ethnic territories. Some of the areas showed significant similarities with ancient archaeological cultures dating back to the first millennium and occasionally even earlier. The maps revealed unexpected interethnic contexts. The system of song organization for calendar seasons and wedding rituals among Ukrainians and Belarusians coincided completely. This is also an ethnic group belonging to the Eastern Slavs, formed on the Baltic ethnic substratum after the settlement of the Slavs in the 6th century AD, whose territory borders Ukraine to the north. The ritual song system in Eastern Poland is very similar. Ukrainians are united with Poles, who belong to the West Slavic language group, by versions of the ancestral homeland of the Slavs. There are several maps. Some common features are also found in the musical forms of Lithuanians, who belong to the Baltic ethnic groups. However, many maps clearly show a complete difference in Russian traditions in the Ukrainian Belarusian morphological areas, that they don't extend to territories inhabited by Russians. In principle, they don't have a system of song accompaniment for agricultural seasons and solstices at all. Their wedding ceremonies are accompanied by songs in which syllabic form plays a minor role, while the structure is based on accents. This is a completely different system of musical organization, apparently formed on a Finno-Ugric basis. In other words, the musical organization of melodies in the Slavic, Baltic, and Ugric worlds had completely different roots. These results help to form the opinion that our northeastern neighbors, who today have unleashed a war aimed at destroying Ukraine as a state, while calling us brotherly peoples, don't in fact have any blood ties with us from ancient times, only a linguistic similarity that developed in later times. The map shows it.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
much. Thank you very much, Irina, and thank you very much, Mariana, for presenting us all these research results. I'm very much looking forward to discuss this, and I'm sure that the audience has many questions to you.